Okay, today is May the 8th, 2009. We are at the Sexville Gatehouse. My name is Ann Horvath and John Furchbeck is on the camera. I'd like to introduce Teenie Mansfield. Her name is Clementine Mansfield, but has always used the name of Teenie. Can you tell us where you were born?
All right, I was born on January 6, 1928 in Floreville,
Okay.
which the house is located on Central Avenue right now. It's the first street back across from the fire company.
Okay.
And my mother's name was Mary Hobbs Diedrich, and her parents were all into the state road, you know.
Mhm.
My grandfather Diedrich died when my father was 18, and they lived up around Poplar Springs.
And you were telling me that about your father going to school?
That's correct. When he wanted to go to high school, they lived in Poplar Springs, and I forget where he caught the train. I don't know. It couldn't have been Woodbine. It might have been Lisbon, up in that area. But he went to Ellicott City, and he graduated from Ellicott City High School. He had to ride that train every day.
Wow.
Of course, he always told me it was a temptation to go ice skating out in front of the store on the river than to go to school. But anyway, he did graduate.
You did graduate.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of work did your father do?
Well, my father was in the service. In fact, he was in all three services. And the last service he was in Fort Meade in the Army. And he was quite talented with art. And he would draw like blueprints of the tanks. And he also played for silent movies in the Army. He played the piano. And he played for silent movies in the Army. And let's see, then when he left the Army, he worked downtown in Baltimore. I think it might have been for Hustlers, you know, drawing dresses and stuff. He was really good. And then I don't know why he came, but he came back to live around Floreville with his mother. And his mother had remarried, and my step-grandfather was a wonderful man. And they all lived together, and when Mother and Dad got married, they lived with them for a while.
What was your step-grandfather's name?
Stoops, George Stoops, and he was from Cecil County, and he was a pilot out on the bay. And you know, these pilots, when they get to be around 50, they have to leave. So he came to work with Springfield. But my father worked at Springfield as an LPN on Ward A for many years, and then he wanted to change, and eventually he became the storekeeper for Springfield. But it was many people that they retired or the health got bad, and then it stepped down to my father. And my father died when he was almost 70. He had very bad heart problems, and he had to retire. But he did pretty good.
Did your mother work?
My mother went to work the first time when she was 50 years old, when I had my second child. And she worked over at Springfield. She started out in housekeeping, and then she went on to work in the central kitchen, and then she went on to be a house mother they brought us nurses from different hospitals. It was probably up and down the East Coast, and she was house mother for them in the Jones building. And mother was really good. She was nice with people. They used to tease her and call her the sergeant because she would want them to do what they're supposed to do. But anyway, then she retired from Springfield. My father died, and then my mother retired from Springfield when she was almost, I guess, close to. Yeah, I think they have to retire when they're 65. She might have been a little bit older than that, but. And then she got into senior citizens, went on trips. She'd never been able to do anything like that, and loved it. You know, went on all these trips, and many times what I would do, I would take the day off and go with her and pull the girls out of South Carroll. We all went and we'd sing. I typed up all these songs, and we gave out prizes on the bus. You know, it was we had a lot of fun.
Oh, sounds like
And one time we went to see Longwell Gardens there, and my youngest daughter couldn't believe it was real grass in there in the middle of winter, and got down and felt the grass. But it was really nice, really.
So you grew up in Floreville.
Yes, I did.
Floreville, how different does it look today?
Well, it's very different. When I grew up, nothing was paved except a little bit of Freedom Avenue. I would say the first two roads, like on 32 and the next street where my mother lived, that my mother told me that Mr. Floor built those houses to accommodate people that worked at Springfield. See, because it was a big employer.
Oh, yes.
And at one time, one of the Floors lived in the house where my mother. But you see, the Floors owned two farms back over there where they built these big homes down. but it's very different.
Very different.
I have to tell you this story. Roy Flore was the son of the older man that I, Milt Flore. Milt lived in the first farm, and Roy lived in the second one. So in order to plow the roads out when it was snow, he made himself a plow. It was like this. So anyway, all of us kids would sit on it back here, and we'd wait it down, and he'd plow the road out. We had lots of fun. And then my grandmother lived on Church Street at the time when I was growing up.
And this was your mother's mother?
Yes, that was, they called her
Mamie.
Mamie. And my grandfather died very young.
Mm-hmm.
He had tuberculosis.
Mm-hmm.
I think working on a state road out in the bay. Anyway, there was a big field out in front of our house. So we would slide down there in the wintertime. And grandmother would bake hot rolls, and we'd have homemade butter and jelly and milk. And she was really good to us kids, you know.
Oh, sounds like it.
Yeah, it was really quite nice.
So you went to school in Sykesville?
Yes, I went to school. I graduated from Sykesville High School in 1945.
Okay. And then when you got married?
Well, let's see. I went to work. I worked in Baltimore for until 1950 when John and I got married. John had been in the service and he came back. But John was raised in Strawbridge. Right. Yeah, he was there 7 years. But we got married in Westlake Freedom because we went to the little church in Floreville, but it didn't accommodate, when you get all the family there, that church only held about 60 people. And it adds up when you have your family.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, we got married at Westlake Freedom, and the man that married my mother and father participated in our service. It was Reverend Shaw.
Oh,
You know,
that's
yes,
interesting.
it's interesting. And let's see, I started school here, I guess it was about 1936. And we had to walk out to the road. The buses don't go around like they did now. We know where the high store is.
Yes.
That was Nellie Dixon had a store there, and we'd meet the bus there in the morning. And when we were younger, we used to roller skate on 32. I don't know whether you remember, we had the old roller skates that were like ball bearing, and you put them on your shoes.
Clip them
Well,
on.
now you'd get killed out. But anyway, there weren't many cars, and we didn't go far there.
Right.
And that was the macadam road now, and it was smooth. It's not like some of this now. You could really skate. And let's see, Springfield, with us kids here. We used to know a doctor's son that had a bobsled, and in the wintertime, you see, they closed Springfield off at night. But it was safe. Nobody was out. Nobody rode around there.
Right.
And we would start out there above where the fire company is. You come in. I call that the main entrance of Springfield.
Yeah.
And we would go all the way down through there on that bobsled. Almost killed us pulling it back. Coming back in. But nobody bothered you. We walked through the grounds at night lots of times. If you wanted, they had a little movie in Sykesville. And in the summertime, we always had an adult with us when we went to that. We'd walk down to the movies and walk home in the evening.
Yeah.
But it was very rural here, really.
So where did you get your groceries and things like that?
All right.
Sykesville?
Well, they had an A&P in Sykesville years ago. Tommy Arrington had that. But anyway, my mother, I don't remember my mother. You made your own bread then? And my mother always had a garden. And because it was during that Depression era, my father hunted and fished, and we had a big garden. We never had much money, but we never went hungry. I can remember one time on a Saturday night, my mother would fix this big pot of turnips. It was just my father, me, and my grandparents. They were the best turnips. But you don't sit down with somebody just to turnips today, do you? But it was good.
Yeah.
It was good. And then when I was in my teen years, I went to work for Nellie Dixon, and she taught me many things about dealing with people. And I put gas in cars and oil in cars, and chop pork chops. And then George Hensey that had the garage right down from there.
Okay.
Yeah, in Floreville. I also helped him take inventory, and he taught me a lot too. And would send these bills out. I only worked like one day on a Saturday for him. And then I was the first paper girl in Sykesville. I delivered papers through Floreville for the News Post and Sun. And
how old were you when you did that?
I was about 13.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I saved money enough to buy my graduation dress when I graduated from high school. Money was scarce,
Yeah.
and
If you wanted something, you had to work hard to get it.
I think that Nellie gave me, something like $5 a week for working, but I could eat anything honey. I could have the ice cream and the sandwich, we made sandwich, and I would help her. What she did, she took orders for the patients, and I would go with her to deliver those. We banged them all up and everything.
Oh.
And I can remember we made friends with one patient over here in Springfield. She was a concert pianist, but she was sick, really sick. And one night she got out on that, and she was out by the main entrance there off of 32. And she told the police she wouldn't get in that car for anybody but Nellie and Teenie.
Oh,
So we
yes.
went out, and they got her in the car and they took her back.
Took her back.
But we were nice to her, really.
But she knew you.
She just taking her a little bit, whatever she ordered from the store. We went in the different wards over there. And then on Sunday sometime, this lady that liked us, she made homemade ice cream for the patients, and we'd go and we get a big bowl of ice cream.
Oh.
And the men's group. See, each group over there had their own kitchen.
Right.
Yeah, they all walked, but that is one thing that we did. And not long ago, I talked to a group of brownies in Hampstead, my granddaughter. And I told them, well, we didn't have any swimming pool like you had because our swimming pool was down at the mill.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the mill. Was it down at Harris's mill or?
No, right there. Harry's.
Harry's.
Yeah, I knew Mr. Harry. His girls went to school with me. They were younger. But anyway, we would go down. It was nice and sandy. Nobody bothered us. We'd pack a lunch and walk down this road, and 32. We had a good time.
Was the mill operating then?
Yes, and it looked nice.
It looked nice.
Yeah, Mr. Herring was a wonderful man.
And do you remember what kind of products they?
It was all kinds of grain, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, I was
yeah,
small,
I
but,
think so.
but I remember that all kinds of grain. And he went on to be, I think, president of the Board of Education at one time. But it was and she taught school too. But nice people.
It's a interesting house there too.
Oh yes, and sometimes if he had birthday parties, they would invite me and Mother would take me down. That was it just rambled. It was beautiful,
Beautiful yard and all that.
Oh, and he kept it nice.
I bet he did.
Yes, he did.
And I'm sure the local farmers came in and out of
Oh
there
yes,
all
he was busy all the time. And then of course he opened a hardware store. And John and I, after we were married, credit wasn't given very much, but we would pay along on some things that we needed. In fact, he had things for the girls at Christmas time. We put layaway. I love Mr. Herring. I thought he was a wonderful man.
You mentioned working in Baltimore. What kind of work did you do in
All right,
Baltimore?
when I was 16, I got a summer job for the Equal Trust Company right down near the harbor, Carroll and Fayette, because my neighbor worked down there, and so she got me. And I did typing in the bookkeeping part and all. So the bookkeeping manager asked me if I would be interested in a job when I graduated. So before I graduated, I had an interview with the Equal Trust Company, and I went to work at 17 for 3 bank officials on Lexington and Liberty. That's right down. That's right near where Hustlers was and all.
Right in the heart of the business
oh
there.
yeah, I knew all of them. I worked 8 years there. But let's see. You took the Blue Ridge bus line came from Westminster. A cab took you out to Eldersburg, and we paid $5 a week round trip. And I made $17 a week, taking all that shorthand and all that typing. $17. Can you imagine that? I have a lot of good memories with that.
You learned shorthand in high school?
Oh yes, I graduated with her. See, then you graduate with a commercial diploma. That's right.
So how did you meet your husband, John?
I went to school with John.
You went to school with
John, when John's mother passed away, the 4 boys were placed at Strawbridge.
Okay. Where was John originally from?
From around Hernwood, down near Reynoldstown.
Okay. So it wasn't far away.
No. But anyway, he was placed there, and he started school with me in the 4th grade. And like some men, near the end, when the war started, and John was to go into senior year, he decided to go into the Navy, which really didn't hurt him as far. He became a plumber, really. But he served in the Pacific. He was on a destroyer. And when during the war, over here at the high school, we had clubs, and we wrote. It was about, I guess 15 of us girls would write to the former graduates of Sykesville High School, and we heard a lot of nice. They would tell us about different things and all. And when John came back from the service, he came to see me. We started to go together. We went together for 2 years, really went together. And then we got married. We had 3 girls.
3 girls.
Mhm.
And you've always lived around?
All but of my 81 years, I've lived 79 years here. See, when John and I worked in Bowling Green, we got married, we lived with Mother and Dad a little while. But it was so much more convenient to me. We lived around Howard Park with Wenham Junction, and that was beautiful there. They had big homes back there. We
Yeah,
had
they did.
a 3rd floor apartment, but Lord, I'd never make those steps now. You know, but it was really, I caught the 32 streetcar, it took me right down to the bank. But isn't it funny, that Greyhound bus when I was working got me down to Baltimore quicker because it didn't stop after Randallstown.
Right.
But that streetcar stopped at every corner and it took you longer to get downtown.
Yeah. So then you moved, after that you moved back. You bought a house up here in
I was going to
Floreville?
have my first child.
Right.
I had her while I was in the apartment in Baltimore. But then we moved back. My mother had fallen and broken her leg, and there was a house that we bought eventually that we rented for almost 10 years. It was a little bungalow, and the back of it met my mother's property.
Oh.
In fact, when the girls were little, my father had an anchor fence, he had a gate, they had a path from my door to my mother's door. They didn't have to go out on the road. But that's when we came back here, and then I had 3 children, and I did not go back to work until all the girls were in school. And my youngest girl was so used to going with mother, and they didn't when school started, she didn't want to go, so I came to work at the school.
So you started to work at Sykesville School?
Yeah, and she did well in school, but she just thought, well, what are they doing today? And I'm in school.
Right. She was used to going
But
with
yeah, our daughter, the one daughter's 55 now, and one's 52, and one's she's 49. They've been very successful.
So what kind of work do they do?
Well, the oldest girl works for out around White Marsh for an insurance company, and she audits claims. She's been
she
there like 20
kept
years.
that commercial interest of yours.
That's right. The second girl's been at Johns Hopkins now for 28 years. She's worked with transplants, and she was hired out of Towson before she graduated.
That's
And, yeah, she's done really well. And she now works in the recovery room in the Weinberg building. She's medical surgical. And she's like, it's like I don't know, it's a manager or a charge nurse, you know. But she's worked there 28 years. And my youngest daughter works in the business part of Shepherd Pratt. So they all followed that, you know.
Business and medical kind of profession.
Yes,
So
yes.
growing up around Springfield.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, you know,
their
you talk
jobs.
about jobs today. Well, years ago, they would take the senior class. That was like a city over there. All these occupations, like your powerhouse, your nursing, all kinds of stuff, your clerical, and they would take us around as just like to see what was going on. We walked over there.
Right.
In fact, you know we had our graduations over there.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and the graduations were quite different than what they have now. We wore white dresses and carried red roses. It was beautiful. And the junior...
Didn't use the gowns?
No, they were no gown. It was, each girl would have a different white dress, but they must be white. And the junior girls would go and we'd cut roses all over the place in, you know, around. My mother had those random roses, and they'd make archways. And the girls would come through, the graduates would walk through the archways. You know, it was beautiful. And the boys wore tux and wore a little rose in there. But it was just quite nice. And we had about, I'd say 32 in our graduating class.
Did you go over to Springfield for other kinds of entertainment, like movies and things?
Well, you know, when I was growing up, if your parents were employees, sometimes in the summer they had them out on the lawn in the evening. And if we had, my mother would walk with me or a neighbor, and us kids were allowed to go. Then they had a big auditorium there. It was just beautiful. That's where we graduated from. But it's not. It makes me sad now.
Yeah, I bet.
But it was just beautiful. And we would sit in the back. The patients didn't bother us. The attendants were there with them. We saw the best movies, new movies you would never see. Just country kids, you know.
Yeah.
And then they also had a bowling alley in one of those buildings near that nursing home. A nurse's home in Springfield. It was one up above that we could bowl for 5 cents a game, but you had to set up your own pins. You know, we had a lot of fun. And we'd slide, you know, I told you that.
Yeah.
And we also went to baseball games. They had big baseball games over there. And picnics.
Now, when you started working at the school, after your girls were born, what kind of work did you do?
I was principal secretary. I was I was the main office secretary, but I worked all year round. I worked in the summer too. You just don't close your school up in June and not get ready for the fall.
Right.
You know, so, and I've had a vacation, 2 weeks. Eventually I had 4 because I had been there 23 years. But I loved that. I loved the kids.
So you saw a lot of the local citizens come through.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And I have to tell you something. A lot of them that went through, then their kids started to come through. And I know I told you this, but I do aerobics with the arthritic people. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Right.
And a lot of my parents, two of them told me the other day they want to be like me when they grow up, and they've got to be in their 50s or something. And I see a lot of kids. I hear from
So
kids.
you really have a lot of people in the community.
Yes, I
that you
do.
know.
Yes, I do. Really.
That's
It's
fascinating.
just wonderful.
That's the advantage of staying in the community a long time.
Yes. I had to tell you something else. You know, in phys ed, where they had these parallel bars, our parallel bars were these railroad tracks that came right near this house. They had a train that ran into Springfield, the dinghy. The dinghy, or what? Of course, when the dinghy blew his horn, we'd all stand up, look out the windows. But we used those railroad tracks for the parallel bars. And I remember we had this teacher said, girls, she had all girls. She said, girls, you have to learn how to walk right. We had books on our head and we walked on a railroad track. And you lift your leg up, yeah, she told us that.
So that you could be graceful and...
Yes. And let me tell you something, that teacher is now in her 90s, and I write to her all the time. She's in a nursing home. And she still calls me Little Teenie.
Little Teenie.
Yeah.
Your name is Clementine, and that comes from your father's name?
That's my father's name.
His name was Clement. And do you know where they came from prior to?
The only thing I know is that my grandfather and grandmother did live in Baltimore at one time, around Milton Avenue, and when they had those snow white steps, the marble steps and all. But I know that my father was a twin, and when his twin was 14 years old, he died from typhoid fever. My father told me that really did upset. They were identical. They had to wear armbands,
Oh my goodness.
And his father was identical. And I mean, I haven't had twins, but down somewhere
His
along
father
the
was a twin too?
Yeah, so somewhere along the line, somebody's going to have twins,
Right.
But no, I really don't know.
But the Hobbs on your mother's
They're from
side,
Howard County.
they were pretty much from Howard County. Now, you mentioned that they were farming and into the road.
Well, Grandpa Hobbs, his name is Harry Hobbs, they were all into the State Road.
Right.
Yeah, they had a shop down here in Sykesville, back there by Southern States, back in there. And, they were in all kinds of weather. And in fact, when my mother could drive, and there was a bad snow, he'd take my mother. I've got a picture somewhere of her sitting in that big old snow plow thing, and she was driving. For my mother was a wonderful driver. Wouldn't do that now with insurance, would you?
No.
But my mother, she was just a beautiful person.
You remember getting the first television?
Yes, I do. John and I bought it when I worked for the Equal Trust Company. And of course I came in contact with a lot of people that had businesses, and we got the one with the doors. And when our first child was little, John would be watching the sheep go and shut the doors.
How about electricity coming to the community?
I can remember. See, all those houses in Floreville, we didn't have indoor plumbing.
Right.
And I can remember faintly that my mother had a little cool oil light to put in my room. But before I went to school, they had electricity.
Right.
But water, they had one pump for 3 houses there. It was all in that deed of those 3 houses. And my mother it was good water. Oh, it was so cold. But my mother had to pump all that and then heat it on the stove to wash clothes. And that was hard.
Yes, that was hard.
And
the wood?
Yeah, well,
That fire hot.
I can remember that mother had a coal stove to cook on, and she had an oven that it was by itself. Mother would sit it on the stove, and could my mother bake? That baked the best cakes in the world, But no, we didn't have a wood stove. We had what they call coal. And I can remember some guy They called him gypsy drivers from Pennsylvania. They'd be on their own, and he'd come down with a load of coal, you know, and there was like a little thing that he put in the, like he'd slide the coal into the cellar.
The chute.
Yeah, the chute, I couldn't think of the chute, and we had that in the dining room, and then we had registers that would go upstairs, but it was cold upstairs. We had feather tips, and I do think they didn't know this, but I was sick a lot, and I think it was from those feathers, because I have bronchitis now, and of course they can do something about that now.
Right.
But that's how you almost froze to death. You dressed by the stove in the morning, you know.
You freeze on one side.
That's exactly.
Burn on the other side.
That's right. In fact, my father hunted and he raised beagles, and one time this Nellie was her name, the beagle. She was so cute. And she had puppies, and my father said, one of these puppies is freezing. My mother said, you bring that puppy in here. And she wrapped it up in a towel and put it on top of that stove, and it cried. It lived.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it was freezing. It was so good.
Yeah.
Well, my father took good care of the dogs. He had straw and stuff for them. He was wonderful.
A nice
with them.
place for them.
Yeah. He raised rabbits, and at one time during the war, he got rabbits that I think they used them for experimental. You know, and they had little tags in their ears, and they were sent to Fort Detrick. Well, you had to do something to make some money. My mother didn't work because my mother took care of the in-laws. My step-grandfather, and they were all getting old and in bad health, and my grandmother, and her father had died, but then her mother wasn't well, so she took care of all of them.
She had all this.
She just knew what to do.
So between the animals they raised and the garden and everybody working together.
That's right, they did. We had apple trees.
Okay.
I used to make applesauce, but I haven't done it for a long time. They had right there, pulled right off the tree. And I can remember, and you don't see much of this, Grandmother had a big cherry tree, and it was yellow, the yellow wax. I could sit up there forever and make myself sick. I could eat those, they were beautiful. But it didn't. Years went by and the tree died. They had pigs, they butchered in the backyard. They made, I've never tasted scrapple like they made. They used all the real good stuff with it. You know, and they were
Did they cure the meat there?
Yeah. And in later years, in the house on Central Avenue, my father built a meat house, he called it, smokehouse. And I don't remember how he learned to do this, but he sugar cured his ham. See, they packed them in salt, and that's country ham, it's salty. But his were not really salty. And you know, the day I sold that house about, I guess, 10 years ago when Mother passed, and you can still smell that smoke in that old, it's not in good shape, the smokehouse, but you can still smell that in there.
Smell.
Yeah, yes, you can. And my father, they were great for frogging.
Frogging?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about
Have you ever eaten frog legs? Frog legs are better than chicken. I mean, if they had the big, they were like bullfrog, and they were, oh, they had them in Springfield, you know, down all over. And my father would go, and he had a, you couldn't use a gig, but he had a, see, the gig would kill the frog, but he had like a frog catcher that it would open up, and then if he'd see him, they'd go at night with a flashlight, and he would catch the frogs, and then my mother would skin them and fry them. They were delicious. In fact, John tells the story that the first time I invited them to dinner, he said, "What's your mother going to have?" And I said, "Frog legs." He thought, "What am I getting into?" But it was good.
Did you ever go to Strawbridge for?
Oh yes. In fact, growing up, they had a marvelous program. John told me that he was 9, and he was all the boys about his age were in the one home that burned down. It was a big white home.
A big white house.
Yeah, and those boys farmed that farm. And John said he used to love to get out and all this planting and all the harvesting of the corn, and they helped with the butchering, and it was just like a city, you know, for them. And he told me he had good years there. But of course, when he got older, you know, you can't stay there after a certain age. And he went into service. But with they had nice activities for those boys, and they could invite girls. And John didn't invite me, but I got invited. And they would have Halloween parties and Christmas parties.
I heard the Halloween parties were especially.
Oh, it was wonderful. And nice parties. No rowdiness, no nothing.
What kind of things did they have to do at the Halloween parties?
I can remember they would make it like you blindfold, and then you make out your drawing on something, and you didn't know what you were sticking in your hand. It was black, and you painted your face on and everything. We danced.
So it was all kinds of games.
And then they had like body parts. they would, you'd shut your eyes, you know, and you'd like grapes. They'd skin these grapes, and it was supposed to be an eyeball.
Oh, okay.
And they had tomato juice was supposed to be blood. And then when the boys graduated, I know the year that we, I'd gone to some graduation parties, they had a big, you had to dress up for that. And the boys dressed up and they had a nice party. And Reed Isaac, that was superintendent when I was growing up, he had twins that graduated with John and I. We still stayed friends, all of us. We had our class reunion. We had one last year. Now, the boy that, well, the guy that takes care of it now, we haven't heard yet, but we'll probably have one. And we get together at Harvest Inn because it's close, and we're all getting older. The furthest one that came was one of the twins from North Carolina. But sometimes he doesn't always make it up, you know. But we hear from him. And my best friend lives in Fayetteville. She grew up here, and her father was a town cop, Walter Blizzard. Did you ever hear him?
I've heard that name, yes.
Well, Gwen is my best friend. We grew up together, and mother had died, and he died very suddenly, and then she was raised as an orphan, but she spent most of the time with me because the aunt and uncle were wonderful, but they were older people, and there were only 2 houses for me, so she looked on my mother as a mother too. So
she spent a lot of time with you girls.
When we get together, we never shut up. All we do is talk. Now, I want to tell you something about the high school.
Okay.
The high school faced this way, you know, it was this way, it faced this way.
It faced
towards Tom Druid, right here, it was right here. Jeremy Road, it was the front of the school.
Okay.
That wasn't Jeremy Road then, but you know. But anyway, before they redid the school, it burned down. Well, we all had to fit, because all of we had trophies for the high school, and what didn't burn, I remember when Jack Bell was principal, he said, what should do this thing? I said, let's call it town. And we took all what was saved down there, the trophies and stuff for the high school. But back over on that playground here, I forget, there was this humongous rock. I should have brought a picture of that to show you.
I've heard about that rock.
Well, we used to sit up on that rock march, and they blew it up when they, you know, redid the school here. But that was the thing, that old rock. It was huge. I don't know why. I guess because they made room for the building here, you know.
I guess so.
But I was the one, when they were doing the pile thing for a middle school, Sykesville was the first middle school.
Okay.
And I did a lot of the typing for that, you know. And we had even principals and all that came from on the Eastern Shore all over to see the type of programs and what we had. I thought middle school was a very nice idea. And the first middle school they had here, they had the 5th grade, but they found the 5th graders were too young. So we had the 6th, 7th, and 8th. But getting back, when I went to school, there was a 4-room school that sit right over here, right where Jeremy Road. Now my mother went to school there, and my mother walked from, they didn't have buses, they walked from Floreville down here. Wow. Before that, mother went, Floreville Church, the little Union Chapel up there, was an elementary school. And they had school there. We were down there from the church, we wasn't any kids.
No.
And mother told me one time when an airplane landed over in the field, must have been one of those little airplanes, first airplane, they closed school and they all went over.
Look at here.
But anyway, I went to that 4-room school when they were renovating this school years ago to add rooms on it. And I went to the 2nd grade in that school there. And then we were transferred back into the building that burned down. And that was really nice. Holmes Locker was a wonderful principal. And in later years, his son came to my retirement because I always loved his father. And he became a supervisor, Brian Locker, and then he was superintendent of schools. But it's just so much here, you know? And I can remember, I don't think it's like it used to be. At Christmas time, you visited the families, you went to see what they all got for Christmas. And I know my mother would have people in, and she did a lot of baking, everybody did. And then you'd have refreshments, and they'd play cards, and we'd play Monopoly, and it was all different. And now, you don't know your neighbors sometimes now. You just, I can remember one time when in Floreville, when they were doing the bus schedule, I could name every child in that village. I couldn't name the one hardly down the road now, you know, where the bus would stop them. But it was just great. It's nice. Now let's see. I can remember when they had Oakland School.
Okay.
And that all closed, and
Right.
Margaretta McCoy, that came over to teach here, taught every one of us, John and I and the 3 girls.
Oh my goodness.
And when she was substituting when she retired, and she substituted at Ellisburg, and she called me and said, I taught Betty. That was my girl. So she taught all 5 of us. But Margaretta did a lot of good work. She was just, she never married, but she just was just, she really was all part of Oakland. She was born in Oakland.
She was born in Oakland, yeah.
I could also remember when they built the dam.
Okay.
All right. Now the dam, I can remember the Milltown and all before that, because the townhouse down here was owned by the Melvilles that owned. Yeah. Okay. So, but it was Milltown, and a lot of my friends, their father and mother, they lived right there, and you know, they walked to work. Woolen Mill.
Yeah. Then when the mill was gone,
They covered it all over.
they were lost.
Yes.
Those people.
They knew nothing but that.
Right. Some of them
Yeah.
moved on to other mills, I understand.
I imagine the one down there in Elephant City.
Yeah.
I really don't remember that. But I can remember that the old road where it was North Branch, that's now all that dam down there where you go over that big bridge. They used to have like, they had dances where you could dance out by the water.
Lucky Duck Inn?
I guess that was,
Do you
my mother knew that,
Yeah.
you know. But when we, John told me he can remember one morning when he went to work. We were living here, you know, and he went on the old road, but when he came back, he come over the new road, you know.
Oh, wow.
And when we rode that Blue Ridge bus,
Uh-huh.
well, I guess, it had to be 25, 30 of us, like young people. And the bus got stuck, and we all got out, and we pushed that bus and slid it and he come on home, because it was hilly there.
Yeah. Was that in the spring or?
No, it was in the winter time, you know.
So-
But, yeah, but we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. What about Sykesville? It's definitely changed a good bit over the years too.
Well, I can see a lot of the old buildings down there.
Yeah.
I can remember when my girls, if you had to get a prescription, we either went to Westminster or Randallstown. Because I knew they had a drugstore, but I don't remember going there. I remember the movie. It was up over, you know, with the Greenberg building. And I can remember going to a dentist there that I was scared to death of. You know, walking over that old building. And I remember all the Browns that ran the bank. And my girl that is a nurse now, she was the youngest teller they had at Maryland National. She did that as a job in high school. Well, it was a good job for her. She worked in the summer.
Sure.
And of course then she went on to college. But let's see. Where Andrew's attic is, that was Mr. Herring's
Store.
hardware store.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then the fire company was right over that little building, and even the fire engine was little then. And we would take the kids on a walk, our field trip, down through Sykesville, and when we come back, many a time, the teachers and I would ride up on, they'd put all the kids on that engine and brought them up the hill. They thought that was wonderful. It was wonderful. And then we had Doc Barnes, that was the up there up the hill. His daughter was my best friend. He was the old country doctor that visited, which they don't do anymore.
Right.
And he had 2 bulldogs, and Maggie and Jigs, and they went everywhere with him. You know, sitting back in the car.
Sitting back in the car.
And we always called him Doc. But Sykesville, a lot of that, it's
It's
still
still
the
there.
original buildings. I think they've done a lot to really, that's really okay, yeah.
How about this building we're sitting in, the Sykesville Gatehouse
All right.
Museum? You remember it?
Mr. Shipley was the purchasing agent.
Mhm.
And Mrs. Shipley done a lot for the community, you know. And she would always call me when I was a kid. I collected for the Red Cross through Floreville. And I remember before I would go home in the evening, I'd come over and give her the money. You know, people didn't have much money, but they did give. And she was very stylish. lady, tall.
Yeah.
I remember her daughter Margaret and Mary Agnes,
Mhm.
but they were a lot older than me.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they went to school over here.
Uh-huh.
And let's see, told you Mr. Herring's girls went. But I do remember that Doc Barnes down here in this big, it was beautiful. The house is not very good right now. But anyway, he kept it real nice, and he had a little office in the back, and he charged $2 for an office visit. Yeah, he's just a nice man.
How about Eldersburg? What do you, anything
All right.
special about Eldersburg?
I can remember Ellsberg, Mr. Gardner, that I thought was the most wonderful man. He owned a big home back over here near where Elder Care, whatever that continuing care. They lived back there. His kids were the younger ones were my friends. The three of them, the older ones, sort of. But Mr. Gardner started out in Floreville with the garage there, and then he went out where Exxon is now. And we would wait there. The bus would pull in there in the morning and take us. But I know that when John and I were getting ready to buy the house there in Floreville, he said, if you're going to buy it to fix it up and live there, fine. But you'll never get out. And we've lived there all these years. John has taken that house out and redone it. But he was a nice man. And then Lyons's, we also waited over there for the bus too. Oh, we'd drink coffee in the morning waiting for the bus, and all go in there and wait. A lot of hunters came in there in the morning because they were on the way to go deer hunting or rabbit hunting, you know. And they had a restaurant. And let's see, what else was there? Was an apartment across the road there where Walgreens is, but I don't remember much about it. Mother would know. And I remember the Bavards, you know, where all that...
Bavard House.
I can remember that was the most beautiful apple orchard there on the right side where the bank is. And that house, there, of course, it's gone now. It looked like a plantation.
Yeah.
You know, with the porch all around it. And you always heard a nice thing about the Bavard. And John told me that the son, where Mary is now, I don't know if that was Waitman, I don't remember. But he was so good to the boys. And they would come over and he'd say, boys, they had BB guns. I need to get rid of all these pigeons, they're driving me crazy. Well, have you ever eaten pigeon?
Yes.
Good.
A long time ago.
The dark meat. My mother thought the broth was great for you when you were sick. But they would shoot these pigeons, and then I guess they used them at Strawbridge. I don't know that. But the community of that Strawbridge did a tremendous amount of work. I mean, they volunteered, they would go over. John said he can remember women coming in, and back then you didn't have clothes that you didn't iron. And can you imagine ironing clothes for all those boys? And they would come over and volunteer for that. John says he doesn't remember canning, but I think my mother helped to grow there and fix something. They would can food.
Right.
And they would sew, they would mend their clothes. And it was a bit of a blow to the community when they moved out.
I bet.
Because we just thought that was the community. We were all...
They were just part of the community.
Yes, by all means, you know.
Yeah.
And the boys were always invited to our homes and all.
And most of the boys were from the Baltimore County, Carroll County area.
Oh yeah.
They were fairly local.
Fairly local, I would say. It wasn't like the Tri-County now that you have, you know.
And most of the boys stayed there until they went in service or graduated from high school.
Probably when they were 17 or 18
Yeah,
years old.
yeah.
But they farmed that ground. They butchered all that stuff. Chickens, everything.
Yeah, it was was there a barn over there?
Yeah, there was.
Uh-huh.
But the Richleys that had property on Obrecht Road, Brooks Ridgey at one time lived over there. It was a little bungalow, but he was the farmer. You know, and Brooks
Farm manager.
They were sharp. He was farm manager. And the boys just loved working and riding.
Was there a swimming pool over there?
Yes, there was. I had the coldest water I've ever been in my life. It was a spring. All right,
Spring
and you know, when you go out 32, you see that entrance that's all knocked down.
Yeah, there's
Well, that
two
used
stone
to-
pillars.
That's correct. It used to be a long hill, and right about probably where they've got the swimming pool now, maybe a little further down, was this stream, and they built, and we could go out there and swim, and we were well chaperoned, you know. And then they had that building where we had the parties. There was a building down there. It was a big, long building.
Uh-huh.
Big, nice.
Like a pavilion or something?
That's a pavilion, but it was all enclosed. They had their Halloween parties and all there. It
Oh,
was
okay.
very nice.
Okay.
Very nice. Really nice. And John said he used to love to go sliding down that long hill in the wintertime.
Oh, not bad.
Yeah, they loved that, you know.
That's a secret.
And they did see that the boys, when they were old enough, some of them did get their license, and they had a station wagon, and somebody would go with them, but they would let the boys learn how to drive and everything. It was very nice. Very nice. And it sort of made John and I sad when the home that, when he was little, burned down. It was all wood. It was great big white, like a great big white dormitory, you know, big house.
Yeah.
But it burned down, but they had rented that to somebody else after it was
Yeah.
moved out, not.
Yeah, that was
you know.
well after the facility had been closed.
Yes.
What about John's brothers? Did they?
All right, and John's brothers, because some of them were older, they went into homes, like foster homes. And the one brother that I just loved, his brother that was next to him in age, he lived with somebody in Catonsville. So when John got back from the service, he went to live with Billy where they had a room there. You know, they had room for the boys. And the one brother, he never came back here when he went to service. He lived in Oregon, but we heard from him. I met him one time, he came here. But you know, sometimes the closeness is not there like you live in your own home.
Right.
Yeah. And John's youngest sister was at Kelso Home, which was a girls' home in Towson.
Oh, okay.
And she was an artist. When she got married and moved to Florida, she was in charge of the art teachers down there.
Oh, wow.
And she's retired now. But when we were getting married, Betty was only about 14. And we had her at our wedding. We got her a dress, and John and I would take her to the movies. She knows, she told me, all those other sisters, you were my sister. we talk all the time now. She's in her 70s now. But he worked for, her husband worked for Glenn Martin, and he was transferred down to, she lived in Orlando now, but she told me that the one woman, isn't this funny, that was a house mother at Kelson. When Betty moved to Florida, she was a wonderful baby. They was only about 3 when she went to Kelso.
Wow.
I mean, the
That's
other sister
very
was
young.
with her. It was very young. But she knew nothing but Kelso. You know,
That's all she could remember.
this one house mother just loved her. And she taught her to sew. And when Betty retired, I went to Florida. She lived near her and she got to see her all the time.
Oh, how nice.
Wasn't that wonderful?
Interesting.
But yeah, no, I didn't know John's older sisters very well. They were many years difference in age. But the younger brother went to work for the people that designed Columbia. He was like, he had a family, but he went to school and got his degree. You got to give him credit for that. And then he was on helping design it, but he died. They're all gone except John, the boys. But I tell you, things have changed, haven't they? I did.
Okay. Let's see, what about other things that, like, places that you used to go that you might want to think back about?
Well, the big trip was for the church to go to Gwinnett Park when they had that nice park down there.
Yes.
You could get in those boats and, you know. And we also went to Kramer's swimming pool in Harrod County. We always had our Sunday school picnics over there.
Where was Kramer's?
Kramer's, it was just a farm, and they had a swimming pool, and it was spring water, but it was large. And it was strictly, in fact, we would have our devotions for our church, little youth group, and all up on the hill. There, Miss Kramer and him always came. We sang and all that stuff, you know,
Oh my goodness.
when it was over with. And the only thing I remember, they had yellow jackets. And I'm very, but I can remember that Dr. Barnes' daughter's boy Randy that just died, Randy Hughes, you know, down here.
I know of him.
He was a baby and he didn't like the water, so my mother would take the playpen and put Randy in the playpen, and we'd take the bunch of kids and go in the water.
Oh,
So it was real nice. And let's see, oh, I got something to tell you. When I was in high school, real quick, up in Tawnytown in the spring, we had a big track meet. And we would think we were going to New York on the bus. We thought it was so long. But all the schools got together, and it was a big play day, and it was great. course, the schools weren't big,
Right.
you know, and every school in Carroll County, I
Was it
did the
Tony
round
Town?
arm, yeah, Tony Town. It's probably out there where the housing was built as you go into Tony Town.
Okay.
I don't know whether it was a farm, but it was just great. We
Huh.
all pulled in there on the buses and we had picnics and we played volleyball and round arm throw and softball and all that stuff.
Okay.
Compete with the other schools.
Yeah.
It was
Oh, my
good.
goodness. And what time frame was that? About what years?
Well, see, I was in high school from 1941 on.
Okay, so that was.
It might have been even the
40s.
7th grade, in,
Yeah.
in the late 30s, early 40s, you know. That was a lot of fun.
And it would have been a pretty good bus ride.
Yeah, well, we thought we were going, you didn't go anywhere, because we were in high school during the war,
Right.
and you had your,
Do you remember
Clubs and
special things about the war? Do you remember rationing and?
I remember that, in fact, I gave my
Dark
mom Billy the
shades.
ration books that my mother had. And I can remember when I worked at the store up there that you kept cigarettes under the counter. You can only get out so much. I remember that I bought a non-ration shoes and it got caught in the rain coming up Harris Street and my soles almost fell off.
Oh,
You know,
my
they were
goodness.
pressed paper, you know. Let's see. Oh, no. I can remember when the war ended, we went down and rang the church bell in Floreville.
Did you?
And that bell is still in that church. It's a big old bell, and
Oh.
we pulled that roof.
The war was over.
And I belonged to civilian defense when I was 15, 16 years old, and I used to patrol some of Floreville.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and we had mock training where
Uh-huh.
somebody, yeah, we had all, in fact, where this house is, my grade would go over here. If it was an air raid, we had air raids and all that stuff.
Yeah.
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 And Buttercup Road was not cut through. 32 didn't go around, it came through Sykesville.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
That's interesting how things change.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed. And it's gotten big, you know. I know my mother was in an assisted living,
Uh-huh.
and I was up above Westminster, and I brought her down, and she knew all about Eldersburg.
Oh, I
She
bet.
said, "Where are we, Westminster?" And she
Because
didn't
it didn't look
recognize it,
nice.
you
Yeah.
know.
It
But
did.
it just was something. And we always threw a party for any boy that went into the service, and the man, there by the fire company, you see that house there, the Boy Scouts meet now.
Okay.
You'll see it
Okay.
from Freedom Avenue. That was the engineer's house for Springfield, and it had a little clubhouse, and he fixed that all up. And Mother and all of us would walk out, no drinking. We had cokes or, you know, and we danced and we played those old records, and we had a party for every boy that ever went away.
Oh my.
Mhm.
Oh my. So you always.
One
knew
other
you were
thing,
going.
one of the boys was drafted before we graduated, and his mother got his diploma.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And not to brag, but my girlfriend and I got the Bell for Key when we graduated from Sykesville High School.
Very good.
Yeah, and she went on. She married an army man
Uh-huh.
and has traveled. But I didn't travel very much. I mean, I haven't been somewhere, but that never bothered me.
So many memories of around here.
Oh,
And
yes.
so many good friends.
Yes, many good friends.
Yeah.
Just wonderful.